When I sacrificed my future to support my family, my sister plotted to kick me out. This house was newer yours anyway, and then When I was 27, my plan was to graduate and never come back to Savannah. I'd spent the last 4 years clawing my way through night classes, temp jobs, and 100 cups of stale coffee in North Carolina. I had dreams: get a steady job in finance, maybe live in Charlotte, finally afford my own place. I wasn't aiming for anything luxurious, just peace, stability, something that was mine. Then, out of nowhere, I got a voicemail from my mom one Thursday morning. Her voice sounded off, cracked around the edges, too soft, like she'd already been crying. "Danielle, honey, call me back when you get a chance. We need to talk. It's about your dad." That message lived in my stomach all day like a rock. I called her during my lunch break, pacing outside the office, shoes clicking against the sidewalk. She asked me to come home that weekend. Wouldn't say much else. Just that something was wrong, and she didn't want to say it over the phone. By Friday afternoon, I was headed south down I-95, my Civic stuffed with overnight clothes and old undies. I hadn't been home in almost a year, not because I didn't care, but because I knew once I got there, I wouldn't leave quickly. Savannah had a way of clinging to you, especially if your family needed something. When I walked into the house, the air was too still. Dad sat at the kitchen table, hunched like someone had poured all the strength out of him. His gray hair looked thinner. His hands, usually rough and calloused from decades in carpentry, trembled slightly when he reached for his coffee. "Hey, pumpkin," he said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. I dropped my bag by the couch. "What's going on?" I asked, not even bothering with small talk. Mom, standing near the sink with a towel in her hands, glanced at Dad. Then she looked at me. "Your father's heart isn't doing so well," she said slowly. "Doctor said no more heavy labor. No more long days on construction sites. His body can't take it." That hit me harder than I expected. Dad had always been tough. The guy who built sheds by hand in the Georgia heat without complaining. Seeing him like that, shrunk down and tired, was like watching a house slowly rot from the inside out. "Can you work at all?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. He nodded, but just barely. They said something part-time, maybe light-duty office stuff. Not sure where I'll even find that. Mom jumped in fast, like she'd been rehearsing this part. "We're not asking for anything big, sweetheart. But we've been struggling to make ends meet. We still owe $67,000 on the house, and the electric bill's been late twice already. Your sister still needs clothes, school supplies, all the usual things. It's a lot." Right on cue, I heard footsteps thudding down the stairs. Kayla, my 19-year-old sister, popped into the room with her earbuds in and a smoothie in one hand. She glanced at me, smiled, and then went straight to the fridge like we weren't in the middle of a crisis. "Hey, Dee," she mumbled. "Didn't know you were visiting." I didn't answer. I couldn't. Watching her act like everything was normal while Dad sat there looking like a ghost made something twist in my chest. Mom followed me to the den later and sat beside me on the old recliner. She put her hand on mine, gentle but insistent. "We were thinking, maybe you could move back here for a little while? Just until things even out. You've always been so responsible. We just need a little time to get back on our feet." I stared at the floor. I didn't say yes right away, but I didn't say no either. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bed, surrounded by posters I never took down, listening to the sound of the ceiling fan clicking overhead. They raised me. They helped me get through college. I owed them something, didn't I? That's what I kept telling myself over and over until morning came and the decision had made itself. By the end of the next week, I'd packed up my apartment in Raleigh, quit my part-time office job, and moved home. My new room was smaller than I remembered and smelled faintly of carpet shampoo and cinnamon air freshener. Still, it was familiar. Safe. At least that's what I thought. It only took 6 days to get a job with a local freight company. Nothing glamorous, but the pay was steady and they needed someone who could handle spreadsheets and logistics. I wore slacks and a blazer and felt like I was doing something adult for once. I even stopped at the bank on my way home after getting my first paycheck, proud of myself for finally making real money. But as soon as I stepped into the kitchen, Dad looked up from his recliner and said, "Mortgage is due tomorrow, kiddo." Power bill came today, too. I opened my mouth to say something, but the words stuck. Just like that, my first paycheck vanished. Poof. Mortgage, bills, groceries. I barely had enough left for gas. I figured it was temporary. That's how they made it sound. But every week was the same. New expenses, new emergencies. Kayla needed new clothes for campus, or money for her friend's birthday dinner, or new books she forgot to tell anyone about. Mom always had an excuse. She's trying to fit in, Danielle. You remember what high school was like. Don't make her feel ashamed. The thing was, I did remember. I remembered wearing hand-me-down jeans and doing my homework at a neighbor's house when our power was cut off. I remembered how bad it sucked, but I didn't remember anyone bailing me out. By the time fall came, I'd stopped checking my own bank account. What was the point? Every penny I earned passed straight through me into the house. I wasn't saving. I wasn't planning. I was surviving. And the weirdest part? No one acted like anything was wrong. Kayla came home with her hair freshly dyed and her nails done. She scrolled through Instagram, showing off some new heels she said were on sale, but looked suspiciously high-end. Mom never asked how I was doing. Not once. Just kept thanking me for being the responsible one, like that was some kind of prize. I wanted to believe they appreciated me. I really did. I thought if I just held on a little longer, something would shift. Maybe Kayla would get a part-time job. Maybe Dad would land some remote work. Maybe I'd be able to save enough to eventually move out. But the truth is, I was sinking, and nobody even noticed. The first time I tried to say no, it wasn't even about anything big. Just a basic weekend trip with coworkers to Asheville, nothing fancy. One of the girls from my department, Monica, had found this little rental cabin with a view of the mountains and a hot tub on the deck. It was going to be 3 nights, split 6 ways. Meals included, gas money pooled. Total cost? About $180. That was the first thing I'd even considered doing for myself in over a year. So, one night after dinner, I brought it up. Casual. Soft approach. Hey, I was thinking of going out of town with some friends from work, I said, pretending to check my phone while waiting for the reaction. Mom didn't even look up from folding laundry. Where to? Asheville. Just for the weekend. I already checked, super affordable. How affordable? She asked, eyes narrowing in that way that made my stomach turn. Like $180 total. For the whole thing. Dad paused the TV and looked over. That's groceries for 2 weeks. Mom let out a slow breath. Danielle, we just replaced the dryer last month. And Kayla said her laptop's starting to glitch. We can't be throwing money at vacations right now. It was like a script. The same phrases. The same guilt tones. I nodded and took my plate to the sink, heart pounding and mouth dry. The next morning, I told Monica I couldn't go. Gave some excuse about a family emergency. She didn't press. She probably didn't care. But I went to work that whole Friday imagining what it would have felt like to sit in that hot tub with a drink in my hand, not thinking about bills or repairs or broken appliances. I started counting days. How long I'd been back. How long I'd been working. How long it had been since I bought anything just for me. It was a pattern that repeated. Paycheck came in. Bills swallowed it whole. Kayla's expenses always got priority. Book fees. Social fees. Rush week dues. At one point, I asked her about it, gently. Hey, do you have any kind of job on campus? She looked up from her phone with this flat stare. Why would I? I already barely sleep with all my classes. But a lot of students work part-time. Even just a few hours. She rolled her eyes. Yeah, well, I'm not like other students. My workload is brutal. I dropped it. Not because I agreed, but because arguing felt pointless. Still, I couldn't help noticing that her workload didn't stop her from going out 3 nights a week or taking selfies from concerts I knew weren't free. One night in March, I came home and found her unpacking shopping bags in the living room. Expensive stuff, designer logos, new headphones, a silk blouse that probably cost more than I'd spent on groceries all month. I asked the question flat out. Where are you getting the money for all this? She paused, then gave me this look like I'd accused her of something unspeakable. Why do you care so much? God, Danielle, you're always acting like my wallet. I nearly laughed. My wallet? She had no idea. I was the one making phone calls to the power company, scheduling deferred payments, splitting grocery receipts down to the penny. I pressed again. Do you even have a job? She turned red and looked away. That's none of your business. None of my business? I snapped. You're living off the money I earn. I think it is. She stormed off, of course, slammed her bedroom door like a child. A few hours later, I heard her telling Mom that I was being weirdly aggressive and jealous of her lifestyle. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling fan like it held answers. Something didn't add up. Kayla wasn't working, but she had money. And not just used textbook, money, luxury purchases. She never mentioned scholarships, grants, nothing. She just spent. And Mom never questioned it. The next few weeks were a mess. Tension dripped off the walls. Kayla avoided me altogether. Mom grew colder, more clipped with her responses. Dad acted like Switzerland, silent, unbothered, always watching TV. Then came the trip bombshell. Kayla came home one night and casually mentioned a spring break trip with her sorority. Miami, beachfront hotel, spa package. It's only around $720 with flights, she said like she was ordering takeout. I laughed before I could stop myself. You're joking. She blinked. No, it's a really good deal. We booked early. Wait, we booked? As in, you already paid for it. She shrugged. I put down the deposit. I figured you'd cover the rest like you always do. I froze. I looked at Mom and Dad, expecting one of them to say something, anything to set a boundary. But they both just looked at me, waiting. No, I said. My voice was flat, cold. I'm not paying for this. The room went still. Kayla's smile vanished. What do you mean, no? She asked, like the word offended her personally. I mean, I'm not paying for your vacation. You want to sip cocktails in Florida? Then you figure it out yourself. You're being ridiculous, Mom said sharply. She's young. She deserves to have fun before real life starts. I stared at her. What about me? When does my real life start? Dad muttered. You're older. You should understand how important it is for her to feel included. I stood up from the table, heart thudding against my ribs. I've been understanding for 4 years. I've been broke, stuck, and miserable while Kayla gets to play college princess. You want her to go to Florida? Then sell that flat-screen TV or pawn her new laptop, because it's not coming out of my account. Kayla burst into tears, of course. Ran upstairs like she was the victim. Mom called me cruel. Dad told me to sleep on it. But I didn't sleep. I paced. I stared out the window. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every trip I didn't take, every dress I didn't buy. The next day, I started searching for apartments. Nothing fancy. Just something with a lock on the door and my name on the lease. By Thursday, I'd found a studio on the east side of town, small, slightly outdated, but clean. I paid the deposit without telling anyone. Then, 2 days before Mom's birthday, I overheard everything. I'd gone upstairs to clean the guest room and came down quietly to grab a drink. I stopped when I heard whispering in the hallway near the laundry room. Kayla's voice. I seriously can't wait until Danielle's out of here. I'm turning her room into my walk-in closet. Mom laughed. Not even a guilty laugh. Just amused. We can't push her out yet, sweetie. There's still 67 grand left on the mortgage. Ugh. So when that's done, she's gone, right? This house is basically mine anyway. Of course it is, Mom said. Danielle can take care of herself. You'll always need our help more. Something inside me snapped. Years of pressure, guilt, missed birthdays, silent tears, everything boiled over in a cold rush. I turned, walked back upstairs, and didn't say a word. Not yet. Because suddenly, I had a better idea. One that would make sure everyone in that house and everyone they'd lied to heard the truth all at once. And I had the perfect opportunity just 2 days away. The day of my mom's birthday party felt like the longest performance I've ever given. I smiled through pancakes at breakfast like I hadn't heard them planning to gut my room and tossed me out the second I cleared their debts. I washed dishes and helped decorate like my hands weren't shaking every time I looked at either of them. They thought I was still the dependable one, the one too grateful, too loyal, or too afraid to stand up. But while I smiled and refilled chip bowls, I was already picturing the look on their faces when I ripped off the mask. Guests started arriving just before 5. Aunts and uncles from nearby towns, a couple of Mom's old friends from the church choir, some cousins I barely recognized anymore. Everyone kept saying how lovely the house looked, how lucky my parents were to have such helpful daughters. I nodded politely while pouring lemonade, resisting the urge to laugh right in their faces. If only they knew the truth. My cousin Lacey pulled me aside while I was straightening up the dining room. She squeezed my shoulder and smiled. You look so much more relaxed than the last time I saw you. I'm glad things are finally working out for you. I blinked. Working out? She nodded. Yeah, your mom said you were really struggling after college. She said they took you in and helped you get back on your feet. That you've been working part-time while they've supported you. I don't know how I kept a straight face. I must have blacked out for half a second, because all I remember is the sound of blood rushing through my ears. They had told everyone I was the dependent one, the charity case they graciously took in. I almost didn't make it through the rest of the party without blowing up. But I held on. Dinner wrapped up around 7, and Mom opened her presents in the living room. She was glowing, performing for her audience, thanking everyone like a celebrity at an awards show. Finally, she turned to me. Danielle, sweetheart, you've been so quiet today, she said sweetly. Did you get me something? I handed her the envelope I'd carefully placed under my coat in the hallway earlier. It was heavy stock paper, gold trim, looked expensive even though it was empty. She smiled like she already knew there was cash or a gift card inside. She opened it, pulled out nothing, and stared at the blank space inside for a few seconds before glancing up at me, confused. Did something fall out? She asked, still trying to smile. I met her eyes, dead calm. No, that's exactly what I wanted to give you. Nothing. Because that's what you, Dad, and Kayla actually deserve from me. The room froze. Every fork, every sip, every whisper died on the spot. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall behind her. I overheard you two the other day, I continued. You were whispering about how you can't wait for me to move out. About turning my room into a walk-in closet. About how I've served my purpose now that there's only 67 grand left on the mortgage. Mom's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Kayla turned pale. And don't worry, I added. I'm not staying long enough to be a problem. I already paid for an apartment and packed my bags. I'm leaving tonight. Dad stood up suddenly, his face going red. This is your mother's birthday. Have some respect. This isn't the time for drama. I laughed. Oh, so now you care about respect? You had no issue lying to our entire family for years. You told everyone I was jobless and living here because I couldn't make it on my own. You told people you were helping me. The room erupted with murmurs. My Uncle Jim looked at my dad sharply. Wait, what? You told us Danielle couldn't get a job. That you and Carla were supporting her out of kindness. Aunt Renee chimed in, frowning. Is that not true? I turned to them. I've paid this household's mortgage, bills, groceries, and my sister's tuition for 4 years straight. I've sacrificed every dollar I've earned to keep this house running while they've told the world I was the one being taken care of. Kayla suddenly snapped, voice shaking. You're just bitter because you don't know what it's like to be young and trying to fit in. I didn't ask for your money. You just acted like a martyr. You didn't ask because you didn't have to. I shot back. You knew I'd say yes. You knew I'd give it. And instead of thanking me, you decided to throw me away like garbage as soon as the balance hit 0. Mom tried to stand, reaching out like she could calm everything down. Danielle, honey, let's talk about this later. You're overreacting. I pulled back. No. I'm reacting exactly the way someone should when they find out their entire life has been used as a loan they'll never get paid back. I turned to the rest of the guests. I'm sorry to ruin your night. I really am. But I couldn't keep pretending. Not when the people I love have been planning my exile behind my back. With that, I left the room. I walked up the stairs while stunned silence trailed behind me. I grabbed the 2 bags I'd packed 3 nights earlier and came back down into a quiet storm of confusion and whispered arguments. As I walked out the front door, a few relatives followed me outside. One of my cousins caught up to me in the driveway. Danielle, wait, are you serious about all this? I opened my trunk and tossed the suitcase in without looking up. Dead serious. I'm done being used. I got in the car, turned the key, and didn't look back as I pulled away. The apartment was tiny, barely big enough for a table and a couch, but when I stepped inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. Of course, the peace didn't last long. My phone blew up before I even finished unpacking. Mom called. Then Kayla. Then Dad. Then all 3 again. Texts. Voicemails. Paragraphs of guilt-laced nonsense. I didn't answer a single one. That week, I blocked all their numbers. A month later, a second cousin I barely remembered called me from a number I didn't recognize. Danielle, please, Your parents are really struggling. They didn't realize how much you were doing. They're scared without you." "Good," I said, and hung up. It became a theme. More calls, more relatives trying to guilt trip me back into that house, that life. I hung up on every single one of them. Eventually, the silence returned. Weeks passed. Then I heard from a friend that Kayla had dropped out of school, couldn't afford tuition, was working part-time at some mall outlet store while mom and dad scrambled to find a way to keep up the mortgage. I felt nothing. Not anger, not satisfaction, just clarity. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I could go out with friends. I bought new clothes without checking my balance 5 times first. I put money into savings. I started to feel like I was living, not just surviving. And I realized something important. Love without respect is just manipulation. They thought I'd never leave because I cared too much, because I was too scared. But they underestimated me. They used me until there was nothing left. And now they'd have to figure out how to stand on their own 2 feet, just like I had. 3 weeks after I moved out, things went strangely quiet. No calls, no texts, no desperate voicemails clogging my inbox. It was unsettling at first, like they were just holding their breath, waiting for me to crawl back the moment rent or reality slapped me too hard. But I didn't crawl. I worked. I saved. I went to bed in my own apartment without wondering who was going to ask me for money before breakfast. I ate dinner alone and didn't feel guilty. I paid my own bills and still had enough left over to buy a used couch and a decent pair of running shoes. Then, out of nowhere, the family group chat exploded. Not with a "we miss you" or a "come home" message. No. It started with my aunt posting a screenshot she'd gotten from my mom, apparently sent to her by accident, which included a breakdown of the new monthly budget, Kayla's portion listed as, in bold. That was followed by 3 cousins asking why my name was missing entirely from the expenses. That opened the floodgates. Suddenly, everyone had something to say. One relative asked if I'd moved out because I got a better job out of state. Another wondered if I'd gotten married. Someone even thought I'd won money. I hadn't spoken to half of these people in years, and now they were playing guessing games about my life like it was a reality show finale. I didn't respond to any of them, but someone else did. My Uncle Jim, who'd been quietly observing during the birthday party fallout, finally dropped a message that said, "I think it's time we stop pretending Danielle was the one getting help." That started the next war. Mom jumped into the group chat with a paragraph-long explanation full of contradictions, trying to claim they only ever asked me for a little help, that I'd offered to take care of things because I was so financially responsible. She even called it a temporary arrangement that I'd chosen to continue out of love. That was the moment my patience snapped for the second time. I didn't care about causing a scene anymore. I was done letting them shape the narrative to make themselves look like saints. I typed out one long message, clear, cold, and bulletproof. I listed exactly what I'd paid for, how long I'd been covering it, and how every paycheck I earned went into a household where I didn't even have privacy, respect, or a say in my own future. I ended it with a single sentence: "Love doesn't excuse manipulation, and I'm done being the family ATM." Kayla tried to clap back, posting some cryptic quote about betrayal and fake sisters. Mom sent a follow-up message begging people to stop fueling negativity. Dad didn't write a word, probably still hiding behind the TV. I muted the group chat and moved on. A week later, I got a call from Monica, my coworker who'd invited me on that cabin trip I never went on. She asked if I wanted to join her and a few others for a weekend beach run and dinner after. I said yes without checking anyone else's schedule. For the first time, I didn't have to. We ran along the shore, got food from a taco truck, sat on the hood of Monica's car watching the waves. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like something I hadn't felt in years, freedom without guilt. Later that month, I treated myself to a weekend trip to Charleston. Stayed at a cozy inn with breakfast in bed, read a whole book by the window, took a solo walking tour just because I could. I didn't tell anyone I was going. I didn't post about it. It was mine. Meanwhile, word got around that things at my parents' house were unraveling faster than anyone expected. Kayla, who was apparently now job hopping between 2 different clothing stores at the outlet mall, had started dropping cryptic posts on Instagram about being abandoned and family failures. One of them featured her sitting on the curb outside our house with a coffee cup and the caption, "When loyalty gets you nothing." Someone told me Mom had been asking relatives to lend them money, just until things stabilize. A cousin mentioned Dad had tried to refinance the house again, but the paperwork fell through. Their once carefully crafted illusion of control was falling apart, and not in private this time. Then came the most shameless twist in this entire saga. A GoFundMe link popped up in the family group chat. Kayla had launched it. The title? Help my family recover from unexpected financial hardship. The description claimed that an unforeseen departure had left their household vulnerable and struggling, that my parents were sick and overwhelmed, that Kayla was sacrificing her education to hold the family together. I stared at the screen, reading it 3 times just to believe it was real. No mention of me, obviously not by name. But the implication was clear. I was the departure. I was the storm that left them in shambles. Monica texted me an hour later. Have you seen Kayla's fundraiser? Is she serious? I sent her a screenshot. Serious as a heart attack. We laughed about it over drinks that night, but deep down, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was just tired. Tired of their lies. Tired of being rewritten into a villain. Tired of people believing their half-truths and sob stories. Still, I let the GoFundMe sit there. I didn't report it. I didn't comment. I didn't warn people. I figured anyone gullible enough to donate probably didn't know me well enough to deserve the truth. 3 months passed. The fundraiser barely hit $300. I heard from someone at church that Kayla had dropped out of school completely. That she blamed me. That she said I ruined her future out of jealousy. One day, I got a text from an unknown number. The message said, I miss you. I know I was wrong. Please let's talk. I stared at it for a long minute before deleting it. No name. No apology. Just more vague fishing for guilt. I wasn't biting. That night, I ordered Thai food, watched a documentary, folded my clean laundry on the floor of my own living room. I thought about what life would have been like if I'd never left, if I'd stayed silent, kept paying, kept shrinking. I imagined myself at 30, still in that house, still waiting for permission to live. And I knew I'd made the right choice. They made theirs when they decided I was disposable. They made theirs when they laughed about using me behind my back. They made theirs when they let me sacrifice years of my life while giving nothing but expectations and insults in return. Now they were living with the consequences. And I was finally living for myself. 6 months after I walked out of that house, I got an unexpected email from Kayla. No subject line, no greeting, just a wall of text filled with vague apologies, twisted memories, and one clear motive. She wanted something. She claimed she'd grown a lot since everything happened, that she now understood how much I'd done for the family, and that she wished we could be sisters again. At the end, she casually mentioned that she was thinking about re-enrolling in school but needed help figuring out how to make it work financially. I didn't respond. I didn't even finish reading. I just closed my laptop and walked outside for some air, letting the cool breeze remind me of the difference between freedom and guilt. The truth is, nothing about that message surprised me. They were never going to just disappear quietly. People like that never do. They hover on the edges of your peace, waiting for cracks to crawl through, hoping that nostalgia will soften your spine. But I'd spent enough years giving them everything I had. They weren't getting another ounce. Around that same time, I got promoted. My manager pulled me aside on a Tuesday morning and told me the company wanted to move me into a senior coordinator position. It came with a pay bump, better hours, and the kind of respect I hadn't felt in years. I said yes before she even finished the sentence. That night, I went out alone to celebrate, ordered the nicest thing on the menu, and had a glass of wine without checking my bank app first. Later, I shared the news with a few coworkers who had become real friends. One of them, Erin, insisted we throw a freedom party at her place that weekend. She said I deserved to toast to more than just a job. She wasn't wrong. At that party, I told the whole story for the first time. Not the polite version. Not the edited, don't make waves version. I told it the way it happened. Every lie, every bill, every guilt trip. And when I finished, nobody looked at me like I was bitter or cruel. They looked at me like someone who finally chose herself. It felt like finally exhaling after holding my breath for 4 years. And then, like some twisted joke from the universe, I ran into my dad at the grocery store the next afternoon. He was standing near the frozen section, staring blankly at a bag of peas, looking older than I remembered. His shoulders slumped, eyes dull. He didn't see me until I was almost past him. When he did, he stiffened and gave me a tight, tired smile. "Danielle," he said, like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to say it. "Wayne," I replied, using his first name on purpose. He noticed. We stood there in silence for a few seconds before he cleared his throat. "I heard you got a promotion," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Word travels fast," I said. Another pause. "Your mother, she misses you," he added. I shrugged. "She missed her chance to treat me like family." He nodded slowly, like he'd expected that answer but still didn't know what to do with it. "I didn't know what to say back then," he admitted. "Things just spiraled." "They didn't spiral," I said. "You let them. You all let it happen because it was easier than telling the truth or standing up to her." His jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought he might argue. But instead, he just looked away. "I just wanted you to know we're getting by." "Barely, but we're trying." "Good," I said. "You should have started trying years ago." Then I walked away, left him standing there next to a pile of frozen dinners and unsaid apologies. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I felt like someone who no longer owed anyone an explanation for choosing herself. A few weeks later, Erin invited me to a networking mixer hosted by her friend's firm. I almost didn't go, but she promised it wouldn't be a stiff, name-tag nightmare. Just drinks, music, and a chance to meet new people. I gave in. That's where I met Caleb. He was funny without trying, confident without being loud, and genuinely curious when he asked questions. We ended up talking for over an hour before either of us realized we hadn't touched our drinks. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something better, comfort at first moment. No games, no pressure, just ease. We went on a real date the next week. Then another. He learned my story in pieces, and every time I offered a raw edge, he didn't flinch. He just listened. 3 months later, I introduced him to Erin and Monica. They liked him immediately. Erin pulled me aside and whispered, "You don't look like someone holding her breath anymore." She was right. I'd stopped bracing for impact. Meanwhile, Kayla's GoFundMe had been taken down. I don't know if it was due to embarrassment or failure, but one day it just vanished. A friend told me Kayla had gotten engaged to a guy she met online. Some entrepreneur who totally understood her trauma. I laughed out loud when I heard it. I knew what would come next. The fake glow, the public devotion, the quiet unraveling. People like her never grow unless they're forced to, and she'd spent her entire life protected from consequence. I wasn't going to be her safety net this time. The last message I ever got from her was short. "I hope you're happy now." I didn't reply because I was. Not perfect. Not without stress or moments of doubt. But happy in the way you can only be when your life is finally your own. I learned how to set boundaries and mean them. I learned that love without accountability is just manipulation in a prettier costume. I learned that being the strong one doesn't mean letting people break you. Most of all, I learned that walking away isn't weakness, it's self-respect. Now, when I come home, it's to an apartment that smells like my favorite candle and feels like peace. I keep fresh flowers on the table because I can. I buy things without justifying them. I sleep deeply. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not sad either. I'm just free. And no matter what they say, no matter how many twisted versions of the story they tell, they can't take that away. I chose me, and I'd do it again.